meeting of the legislative affairs will come to order. Clerk, please call the roll.
All right, Counselor Simonelli.
Here.
Counselor Hamlin. We got Counselor Napolitano.
Here.
And we have Counselor Sonny.
Here.
We have 4 members present. We do have a quorum.
Joe McGonigal will not make it today. He has a work commitment. We can stand and salute the flag.
Mr. Chairman, can we take item number 2?
Second.
City auditor is here after hours, and I'm sure he'd like to get home.
Clerk will read number 2, please.
Right, item number 2. This is a resolution brought by Councilor Rosa DeFlorio that rules be established on the appropriate distribution of city council expenses.
Mr. President, can we invite the sponsor and the city auditor?
Please state your name and title. Peter, Councilor Napolitano. You want to make a statement first?
No, sorry about that. So I know the new governing body here is trying to come up with policies with regard to their expense reimbursements and what have you. I did some research with the city clerk, and I realized there's actually no rules in place at all, so I don't have anything to follow with regard to how things are reimbursed now. The way I feel about it, if I have a policy, it's a policy citywide. It's not just a city council policy and then everybody else policy. So any policy that's administered by me to reimburse would be the same policy I use throughout the city. That being said, there's some different unique things with regard to city council business that may differ from what typical city employees would have for reimbursement. So calling neighboring Revere, they have a similar situation where council's got an expense account, and basically the Revere's policy, which I would prefer, is just to give the councilors whatever dollar amount that's deemed appropriate for your expenses and give you a 1099 form, and then you use those expenses as you see fit. At this point, it's not wrong.
Sorry. Yeah, because that becomes a salary. If you're going to give us a 1099, we're limited to $15,000. That's all we can earn. You give me $15,000 and 1 penny, we're over the bounds. You can't give me expense money as a salary.
No, I'm giving you expense money, and to give you a 1099 form, and you would claim your expenses however you see fit on your taxes. It's perfectly legal, and I think it's the most efficient and effective way to do it because, again, you guys and girls are going to use your money as you see fit, but if it's going to be reimbursable through the city auditor, you're going to follow in the same policies that the city auditor have. Now, I read your travel policy that you were proposing, and there's a lot of things in there that I would change or not allow. And so if we had to talk about the travel policy, I would modify that travel policy to say, well, this is, the travel policy for the council is gonna be the same travel policy as everyone else in the city. It can't
Well,
just be
you're
the
throwing
travel
that-
policy of the city council members.
You had indicated that to me the other night.
Right.
And I didn't know that we had one. I didn't know that we had an active policy one. The reason that we come up with it is because we wanted one in our rules. You know, because our.
No, I
rules
understood
didn't-
that, and I told you at that point that I have policies and I,
So
and,
if it's one for the city, that's fine. You know,
okay.
that's fine.
But again, I think the idea of, expense reimbursement could be simply handled by the body coming up with the appropriate amount for expenses per counselor, and you get that, and you expend it the way you see fit. It's not a salary, it's a it's a 1099 expense reimbursement.
We're allowed a certain dollar amount. Personally, I don't want to take a penny over whatever we're giving the person. So realistically, by giving us a dollar amount, we're not really saving the city any money. By having a reimbursement policy, and again, I think we should adopt, we can adopt in our rules, the city's policy. I also was not aware that, come to think of it, it makes sense that it would be. I'd like to see us reimburse strictly for what we do. So if one person is only using $500 of the money, that's all the city is going to be liable for. Giving us the whole $1,500.
I have
There's
idea
no
what
amount, there's
it
no
is.
amount set at all. You don't even have some specific
Well,
amount.
we have a budgeted amount.
There's nothing that,
4,000 this year, 4,000, 4,000.
there's been nothing formally adopted with regard to dollars. There was, last year during the budget process, I was under the impression that the city council would have a $2,000 per person per year expense account. I had suggested that because you'd only be here half a year, we would make that $1,000 for fiscal year 14 because we started on January 1st. I was told that that was not, but that wasn't in my jurisdiction to decide, but at that point, I understood it as $2,000 per person per year. Now, some interpret your expense account to be $2,000 for each member for a sum of $22,000. The way it sounds like you're explaining is that there would be one pool of money, and one council may be able to spend $8,000, and one would be able to spend $500. I don't know, but I don't think there's been anything formally adopted. So right now, I'm going off of what I've been hearing. I haven't seen anything that said these are what the expenses are per person. That's why I'm trying to come up with the most efficient policy. If that there is some specific amount per council for expenses, we could just give you that sum amount, and then you would expend it on the expenses that you see appropriate, and then you would deal with it on your personal taxes however you seem fit. That's my opinion. But if there's going to be a policy and it's going to be a formal process by which you submit travel expense vouchers and receipts, and it comes through my office, it would just be the same policy that we would use for everybody in the city. That's really the point I'm trying to make.
I see your point.
So,
I see your point.
From an efficiency perspective, I researched, there's nothing illegal about us giving you quarterly in arrears your expense money, and if you want to buy a laptop, or if you want to go to a conference in Washington D.C., or you want to go to some local training, I mean, that's within your purview. You get that money, we give you a 1099. You would explain it however you like on your own personal taxes. If you really want to get into the pulling a purchase order for 11 council members, and there's an extra, some specific for each one, and then you draw down from that, sure, it could be done, but then those reimbursements are at my discretion, and I would have to be the judge and jury on what is and what isn't allowed. And like I said, in some cases, your line of business is much different in some respects than the regular city, but I can't have this two sets of policies. So what I'm trying to do is come up with a simple solution that works for everybody. I thought that was it. I talked to the city CFO of Revere. They've kind of been through this back and forth, and that's how they treat it, and that would be my suggestion.
So it's basically a flat, what your suggestion would be, what they use would be a flat fee, flat amount,
Would-
one set amount,
Whatever the,
that we receive a 1099 for in addition to our W-2s,
right.
and that is to cover what we would normally justify as council expenses
That's right.
individually. And then it's on us to make those claims,
That'd be my recommendation.
so that simplifies the process. It also holds us to a set dollar amount.
Yeah, and I think that 11 members may have 11 different ideas of what they'd want to do with their expenses, maybe they, you know, and that's perfectly legitimate and up to your discretion.
Right now, I'm sorry, excuse me, it's not capped. It's definitely not capped. Right now, one counselor can spend the whole 22,000, and the other counselor spends nothing. It is not capped.
Yeah, I wasn't
this
even
is
aware
the
that we
reason
had
why-
an expense account
Right.
until the
No,
on, so.
I understand, and that's the reason why I brought this up, because
Yeah.
this needs to be corrected, and it's not just for us, this is
Yeah.
for the future. You know, you correct it, you make sure that it doesn't get out of
Oh, yeah,
control.
the potential for abuse of this being a bottomless trough is there, and it shouldn't be, I agree 100%. And I fully support that we put some restrictions in place.
I'm
Council
sorry, I
Sadi,
still-
please. Chief?
Oh, I'm sorry.
So after we receive the 1099, we work with our accountant on the different expenditures, and then what's the difference? We have to pay taxes on it as a salary if it comes down to that. If you don't, so if they cap off at $200, say, and you don't spend that $200 a month, and you spend only $100, you'd be taxed on that other 100, correct?
Yeah, you have a 1099 form as if you're a business, so to
Right.
speak, and if you have $4,000 worth of expenses as your duty as a counselor, you would offset your $4,000, $2,000 of 1099. And again, that's for each person to decide individually. Kind of puts the onus on you guys to figure out how you're going to spend that money. If you vote it and you're entitled to it, I think that's the most efficient way. Again, if you want to set policy and you want to do it on strictly reimbursement, you're gonna create some administrative work for the council, Caroline, myself, we'd have to follow policies. Happy to help you develop policies, but I just want to be clear that there'll be one policy that I follow for everybody. It's not just a city council policy and then the rest of the city policy.
And you said Revere does this already, and they have no problem with it, with the,
There's nothing illegal about it. It's, you know, we give 1099s to all kinds of, you know, vendors. You'd be set up as a vendor anyway. Even as a reimbursement, you'd be set up as a vendor in those reimbursements. The difference is basically if you go through the city and everything's truly a reimbursement, then you won't get a 1099 because
Right.
it'll all be deemed. But you leave us in a situation where you want to go buy a $1,600 laptop. Now, I don't know if I would allow anyone just to buy a $1,600 laptop under my policy, so I'm going to have a little bit of trouble justifying that expense for somebody here. And are you subject to our internet policies? Are you subject to our firewall policies? I mean, it's just a little bit of a slippery slope, so I try to make an efficient policy that works for everybody, and this one seems fairest, in my opinion.
Can I'm sorry,
Councilor DeFleur.
okay, let's use a computer, for example. I go out and buy a $1,600 computer, but now we come up with this, that you're gonna pay every 3 months after, right? Every 3 months, you're gonna give somebody, a counselor, a check as that expense account. You don't wanna pay them ahead of time, because then if they leave, or they have,
No, I would do it in arrears. I mean,
In arrears.
everything would
Okay.
be 3 months, you know, if it's a quarterly check, the first 3 months go by, you gotta check for those 3 months. So the
okay, so
next 3 months
say,
go by.
okay, say a year goes by, and that's enough for me to buy a laptop. I'm using me as an example. Now, can I say to you, I don't want the rest of it. I wanna keep it in the city?
I mean, I think the way I'm laying it out is that it's your money to do whatever you please. That's your money for your expenses as a city councilor. If you only spend 3,000 of it, then I guess the other 1,000 would be considered income from a tax reference. I'm not a tax attorney here, but I'm just, from my seat as the auditor, I would be obligated to give you a 1099 on those expenses because I don't have all the paperwork to legitimize that you're not taxed on that particular revenue stream.
Councilor
Thank you.
Hanlon.
I'm sorry, I don't agree with, at all with what you're saying. An expense is an expense and it's not taxable. To give a 1099 meaning that it is taxable, meaning it's something that you consider a wage. And I'm still saying that you have a $15,000 cap on our salary and you can't get any more money. I don't care what it's for. And if you spend $2,000 on a computer, on a laptop, you have to show that that $2,000 is only used for this expense. And if this is going to be in Peter's house or anyone's house, how do you prove that you've only had $2,000 for that laptop and you only used it for city council business? You can't. How do I say that I buy a suit and I'm only gonna use it for city council business. I know you can't do that with the IRS. They won't let you do that.
Actually,
Well, the same
I
problem
can
you
answer
have,
that question.
the same problem that you're saying right there is the same problem you'd have if you did your personal taxes or versus I okay the expense. I okay every expense in the city, so
Yes.
what you have to legitimize with, when you do your taxes, would be the same thing you have to legitimize through the city, so to me, it's 6 of one, half dozen the other, and I know our neighboring city does it, so I don't, there's nothing, we can disagree on it, but there's nothing illegal about it.
If I put an expense in and you pay for it, I don't have to put that on my income tax.
That's correct.
So, but if you give me $100, I've gotta put that on my income tax.
Not if you show that you spent $100 to do your business as a city councilor.
Councilor Napolitano.
Okay, I understand what you're saying, because my entire time as a city councilor, my accountant has always, I don't remember the schedule number, but I know there was a particular
Schedule
way to be able to
Schedule C.
claim a certain percentage for dry cleaning, mileage, a percentage of phone usage. These are all legitimate deductions. So I understand that part of it. I also understand the reason for the 1099 being different than the salaries. I've had reimbursed, I've had expense accounts with other businesses when I was working in the banking community. And I always received a separate 1099 for mileage, for anything else that was conferences that I paid for out of my own pocket. So I do understand this, because you're getting the reimbursement through the 1099. It's going through on your tax returns as your personal income. Your schedule that indicates your expenses as a city councilor cover that. And that's where your documentation comes in. In that scenario, I'm fine with this, as long as there's a cap to how much any one of us gets. I've never even thought of the idea that city council would have an expense account. Any of us have always just paid for that out of our own pocket. But if it's in the budget, if it's part of the situation, part of the rules here, excuse me, the charter, then I think we need to make sure that that money's protected for the vote.
Well, this is what I'm here for.
Yeah.
Committee to put that
No,
one
I know.
together.
I'm saying is I understand.
My
What point you're getting
my
at.
understanding is that you were gonna come up with some kind of amount that you deemed necessary to do your business as a council, 2,000, 3,000, whatever you decide. And then once those rules are decided, once I have an ordinance that says each council is allotted X amount for expenses as they perform their duties as councilor, then from my perspective, it's like, okay, what's the best way to treat this? Now, we can do what our Councilor Hanlon says and have you guys give me every time you go and go through the tunnel with a receipt and drive to Danvers for a meeting or this or that. Or I could say, okay, you guys come up with an amount, here you go, we'll disperse it in arrears, it's monthly, quarterly, and then you can handle it how you see fit. Administratively, I think it would be the most efficient, and I think the councils can have the most flexibility with the scenario. But again, if you decide to do it a different way, then we have to develop the policies and make sure it's uniform with everything we do in the city.
Has anybody from the city council submitted anything for reimbursement at this point?
I think there's just some from the MMA conference on Councilor Hanlon, and again, I'm in a situation now where there's no really rules to say what is or isn't reimbursable, so to the extent that we've actually processed that, I think I was kind of waiting for this meeting to see where we stood and figure out what the rules are. There's no rules right now, I guess, is the issue I have. There's money, there's an appropriation for expenses for the city council, but there's no rules that govern it, so I was hoping that I could help set those rules up and help you administer them however you see fit.
Excuse me,
Councilor Hanlon.
I haven't heard that, you had mentioned that you thought we were gonna come up with a formula for distributing the money.
No, I mean, I was told it was a 2,000, this, again, nothing in writing, my understanding, when I first started working here, was that the new city council was being formed and they were gonna get $2,000 per person. I thought that was for the year. It ends up being a half a year when we did the appropriation, so I was thinking it would be 1,000 for a half a year. I was told it was 2,000, so, which would make it 4,000 for a year, but again, there's nothing in writing, so I'm kinda just going on what was appropriated. And right now, there's $22,000 appropriate, actually $24,000 appropriate. I think 2,000 was put in for some kind of celebration that was supposed to be because you disbanded the bicameral system. But right now, there's a $24,000 line for expenses.
I wasn't invited. But then I wouldn't have expected it.
But anyway, all the money's just sitting there waiting for it to be dispersed or charged against. But again, no rules, so here we are.
If I could, outside of the group here, Melissa, do you have any idea what was passed in the budget last year in that regard? Can we ask the city?
I just told you, it was $24,000.
Oh, it was 24,000?
Yeah.
Okay. So all we have is a lump sum amount that's been appropriated.
Right.
With no direction as to how to disperse.
So if you wanted to go somewhere and spend $20,000 against it, I don't know whether I can say yes or no to that, because there's nothing that says
I'd be absolutely against anything like that, yeah.
the Hawaii conference or something, you know, I know, there's no rule on who can go where and how it's governed.
Councilor Sonic.
Did you put anything together, the wording or rule that we could put in order if we decide to do this?
I didn't, because I just wanted to see where this meeting went and then get some direction, and I'm happy to help however I could.
Okay, thank you.
Councilors, what's your pleasure?
I'd like to, see, I don't know how the board feels, but I think that would be an easier way to do the 1099 and, as Mr. Biscay said, and, come up with the wording to have it as a rule. And then, we need to sit here, I'm not sure if we have to send it to finance to appropriate the money, or if we can set the salary here, we can do it here. So we need to set a cap, and, I'd like to have, my colleagues, work with me and see what we can come up with a cap, or what we wanna.
I'll make a motion to grant further time and request Mr. Biscay create a draft of a layout of what he recommends, so as a body can review it and make a decision based on the material and make amendments as we see fit.
A second?
Not to want to cross debate, who are we asking to make this draft?
City auditor. Only because he's gonna be disturbing the funds if we're talking about a general, flat amount. You know, I mean, I wanna see how it's gonna be dispersed. I wanna see, make
Okay,
sure
it's okay.
that.
I just don't like the fact that we pawn off our jobs to someone else. I mean, if I think we have to draw a draft, then we should draw the draft. And I don't mean nothing against you, but I mean, I don't think we should keep passing things off to this one to draw an ordinance, this one to do it. Law department draws ordinances and all that kind of thing. I think we should do our own ordinances, then let them take it apart,
Well,
whatever they want to do.
In this regard, I think that, because he's gonna be administering it, and that's why I suggested a draft, so we can take it apart.
Okay.
And be able to shape it as we see fit, as long as we're in the particular guidelines that he has to follow through the state guidelines regarding distribution of funds in this case. I'm not a big fan of the fact that we've got a blanket amount, but at the same time, I do get the logistics.
Not to, Mr. Chairman, not to Peter, but to anybody. I just am so opposed to that word distribution of funds. You know, we started off making $5,500 and $7,200, and our salaries have jumped to $15,000, and all of a sudden we want more. And I don't believe we should. I think we make plenty of money.
We don't want more, the charter put it in.
Well, the money's already there. That's the
I know, but it's to be used for your expenses, and to do what you feel like you want to do with it, I don't consider that being expenses. So, that's my part on it. So whatever you write is okay, whatever isn't, I will be opposed to it. So,
I will, second Peter's, motion that Mr. Biscay put something together.
Well,
and bring
grant
it-
further time.
Grant further time for the next meeting.
Motion and is seconded to, grant further time?
Can I just ask, I'm assuming that you want me to put something together that lays out
Yes.
what I explained?
Yes.
yes.
Okay.
yes.
Thank you.
Grant further, the motion was to grant further time, have the city solicitor come up with a draft,
The
My-
auditor.
The auditor.
the auditor, I'm sorry,
Am I, I'm sorry.
come up with a draft and present it to the.
Do you want me to leave the sum of money blank, or you want me to work with what you currently have right now? Am I under the assumption it's
What do you think, John?
well, you have $2,000 right now.
We're gonna amend the draft as a committee, I think, to be able to satisfy both sides. One, be able to utilize your expertise, but at the same time, preserve the fact that we do make our own rules. This will give us a foundation that we can discuss, and as a committee, we could talk about the dollar amounts.
Yeah. I can still understand that we need to fit it into the rules of the city too, you know, so that's okay, you know.
Council Sonic.
Just one question. Can we write two rules? Could we have the one that you're talking about, and then also, you mentioned the city expense for the travel that we have for the city? So
I think
that
if we can get a
someone didn't wanna
copy
take
of
it-
the-
So if
Yeah,
someone
I-
didn't wanna take a 1099 and someone just wants to use it for travel and conventions and that's it, then they can go that route?
Oh,
Or is that too?
I would think you would go one or the other.
Okay, that's, I just wanna ask.
Yeah, and I can give you drafts of the travel reimbursement policy, and I did mark up Council Hanlon's draft, and, I mean, it's a fine draft, there's just stuff in there that if we were gonna go this route, I would make it more adaptable to the
Okay.
entire city, so,
That's
I mean,
okay.
it's actually very good, it's just, there's some things in there that I'm missing. We can't buy alcohol, we can't buy tobacco, you know, there's certain things that we have to follow with regard to Mass General Law on what we can actually reimburse for, so I would, if we were going that route, I would try to amend this and create one
That's-
comprehensive policy for
I
everybody.
think I put that in there, didn't I?
No. There's other things in there,
I
but just,
thought I had that in there. That was
But-
the food only?
I'm sure you know that rule,
Okay,
but,
yes, I do
but
know
it'd be
that,
good,
yeah.
you know, that would be part of it, so,
I would start with just your recommendation, how you.
Okay.
feel. Thank you.
not a problem.
Thank you for your time.
Motion to grant further time.
I already did. Just gotta do the vote.
On the motion, it's been seconded on the motion. All those in favor?
All right.
Opposed? The ayes have it. Clerk will read number one.
All right, item number one, then. This is a resolution by Council Rosa DeFlorio to create an ordinance which would prohibit the stealing of trash.
Can we invite the sponsor to come up?
State your name and title for the records, please.
Rosa DeFlorio, City Council, Ward 5.
Thank you. Councilman Paul.
I gave this body a rough,
Actually, the members need to start.
That's right.
Go ahead, please.
oh, I'm sorry.
No, it's okay, please.
Count.
Go ahead.
I gave the members a copy of the ordinance, and it's up to you to, if you have any questions for the chief of staff or anybody, and we can change this around or whatever you prefer.
Councilman Napolitano.
Thank you. The thing is, and I haven't made any secret to you that I'm not a big fan of creating ordinances that are potentially either duplicated or unnecessary. I did do some research. You know, the big thing that I've always learned and learned early in my time on rules and ordinance in the city council was that establish the need before you create the solution. And I did ask for a breakdown from the chief of police department office regarding just how many barrels have been stolen in the city of Everett. And the crime analyst came back with that in the last year, there's only been 4 barrels stolen.
I respectfully disagree with him.
Well,
I will prove
well,
that in a
they
minute.
They track that information. Now, this
We
came
have it
from-
right here. We have the,
I think they misinformed you by accident, because this is the file of all the, I need it back, this is the file of all the,
Well, how many barrels are in here?
you know what, I thought.
Because they've identified, see, the thing is, I want to know totals. See, the problem, there's 2 things that I'm looking at here, and again, that's fine. I do understand that, from my understanding, that is a missing barrel report has to be filed prior to them being able to get a replacement barrel. But the thing is then, in talking to some of our colleagues here, you know, the one thing that we always hear during the campaigns is we get feedback from people about various issues. And the one thing that I have not heard from any of the people, any of the councils I've spoken to, is whether or not we had that specific feedback. There has been questions on whether or not, or where the barrels may have ended up. My big concern is that, first of all, if somebody steals a barrel, we already have, that's considered larceny, and that's already covered by the Everett Police, you know, and the Everett Police's job is to enforce that. But if a barrel is hooked on the back of a truck and then dropped off 2 houses down, 3 houses down, which is a very common occurrence in the city, that I hear a lot of complaints about, you know, and somebody accidentally picks up the wrong barrel, I don't want to see anything in place that fines them for that, because they're not maliciously or acting in any malicious manner to be able to procure that barrel. they're picking up the barrel in front of their house because that's where capital waste dumped it. And this is happening more often than barrels physically being stolen. I know that the police department identified that they recovered 10 barrels, which were originally labeled as stolen, and it turned out to all be down the Redemption Center down in Spring Street. They were recovered. Okay, that's police work, that's picking up materials. But, you know, the thing is that before we create any kind of ordinance, I'd like to hear from capital waste. I'd like to hear from more sources as to just how severe or how intense this problem really is before we put something in place that's just gonna take more money out of people's pockets.
That's not my intention. I mean, my
understand
intention
it.
is
I
not
understand
to,
But we have
The reason-
laws, we do have laws that prohibit people, bikes being stolen. And we have a lot more bikes stolen in the city of Everett than we do trash barrels. We're not creating an ordinance for that, because it's already covered under the Mass State laws as larceny. And these barrels are too, and I have a hard time distinguishing the difference. And that's what I have to be
I don't,
convinced
well,
of.
I'm not trying to make it a criminal,
But it's a criminal action already.
I know it is, and that's not what, I'm not trying to do that. What I'm saying is, if I have a barrel in my driveway, and John has a barrel across the street from me, and I end up with John's barrel, and he ends up with my barrel, that's not a problem. I still have a barrel.
But under the ordinance,
These are
it'd be fine.
physically, no, you wouldn't be fined. These are physically people taking the barrels. And the reason why I came up with this, okay?
How is that
My
not covered under
daughter-in-law's,
theft then?
my daughter-in-law's mother had 2 barrels stolen,
Mm-hmm.
okay, in 2 months. And the second time she called me, she's elderly, she was literally crying. She goes, Rose, the city's not gonna believe me. I have to go do another police report. She was nervous. That's when I called Steve up, and I asked Steve, I said, Steve, how many barrels are being taken? I mean, if there was only 4 barrels being taken, I wouldn't think this would be a necessary step. And he says, there's quite a few of them. So,
But where's the documentation, and why is it that the police is not providing documentation showing that there's more than 4 barrels being stolen? See, that's the question I have. See, this is raising questions, and if we're gonna be raising questions, I'd like to establish the need before creating the solution. I think that's only prudent. We're talking about creating a solution, and yet we've not had one expert come up here and identify to any great length, and at the meeting when this first came up, we wanted to bring up capital waste. That was you had mentioned that was unnecessary. We wanted to hear from the police department. That was considered unnecessary. It's not unnecessary if we can't establish that there's a cause first to create a solution.
I don't have a problem with Capital Waste coming here. They were trying to let Capital Waste enforce it. That's what I had the problem with.
Why? They shouldn't be enforcing it.
Right, that's what I
That's
said.
not-
I don't have a problem with Capital Waste coming over here to ask any question. I had a problem with them. They were saying to have them enforce it. You're welcome to invite anybody you want over here. This is your committee meeting. Not, it's not mine. And I'm just letting you know the complaints that I received and what I come up with. I wanted to make it a non-criminal. In other words, I know it's going to be difficult to
But
catch
it is a
people.
criminal action.
But I really didn't want to make it criminal. You know what I mean? You got a 20-year-old kid that goes out there that takes a barrel, he thinks it's fun to put it in the back of his car and run off.
That's criminal.
Right. But,
I don't have a problem with that person going through the extent of the law, because that's how people learn. And what kind of fine are we gonna attach to a stolen barrel when we're gonna let them off the hook for larceny? That's what the point I'm
Well,
getting at.
you can
There's
make-
a contradiction here, and I've heard from several police officers who have raised the same question. Why are we creating a fine when we have laws to protect our residents from that?
I understand we have laws, but the police can't go out there with cruisers and seeing who's taking these cars. They have enough to do. You know what I mean? They have
Who
the
would be
drug
doing-
dealers, they have,
Who would be doing that then?
you have to have code enforcement.
Okay, I'll give you a bit of advice that the code enforcement in Malden had given me when we first created the code enforcement ordinance, roughly about 10 years ago. And he said the one problem they ran into in Malden was that what the original intent of code enforcement creating, as other things came up and other priorities came over, it negated the ability of code enforcement to do what their primary job was to do. Now, we're gonna ask them to go out now and check barrels on top of whatever else they're doing. I don't know how many.
They don't have to check barrels. They go out in certain sections of the city at different days. So on Monday, they might be on Ferry Street checking the trash. As they're checking the trash, all they have to do is get this thing that the number comes up and says the barrel doesn't belong there. So now what happens is, so the barrel's at 335 Ferry Street, and it belongs at 320 Ferry Street, so common sense would tell you that was an error. Maybe the capital waste put it there. But now, if you go to 325 Ferry Street, and the barrel belongs down from Green Street, you know that was intentionally taken.
Wouldn't you agree that code enforcement is more effective if they're out chasing illegal apartments? They're out taking care of people who are leaving their trash unnecessarily on the road?
Well, they're doing-
Isn't that their primary job?
Yeah, but while
Now we're
they're
gonna have
doing
them-
that, they can
Now we're
do
gonna have
this-
them searching for missing barrels.
They're not searching for missing barrels.
But that's
Well,
what
you
you
just
said
said
to
they're
enforce
going around to see people that are putting trash out the wrong way. They're in certain sections every day of the city. While they're seeing the trash, all they have to do is push a button to see if the barrel belongs there. It doesn't add any more work. They're not going every part of the city. It's the same thing with the trash. You might get a ticket one day because your trash is overfilled, and the other side of Everett may not, because they're not in that section. They do different sections in different areas.
See, the simple solutions, I put my address on my barrels. If my barrel ends up down on Mead Street, I can still find my barrel. I don't need to have code enforcement find it. I don't need to file a police report. I don't have to accuse anybody of larceny. These are prudent steps. I don't think that we've established that the degree of severity here to warrant creating an ordinance. And that's just my opinion. I'll step back and let anybody else have
Counselor
their
Sonic.
opinions.
Oh, I'm sorry, Councilor Hamlin.
I agree a lot with both of you, Peter. The only thing, the last thing you said, I know you're not a 75-year-old citizen, and they can't run out and get that, And I am somewhat concerned with this police report that I have that says 4 barrels were stolen, but 10 were recovered. That doesn't make too much sense to me, And if I could, Mr. Chairman, through you, if I could invite the young lady back up, I need
It's
to
4
ask
in
her a
one day is
question.
what it was.
Uh-huh.
It's 4 in one day that
No,
were
no,
taken.
it's okay. I just need to ask you a question, and I'm sorry, but I saw you running up with that
No
batch of
problem.
paper. It looks like an awful lot of stuff, and I
This is
know Peter had
everything.
asked for a number, so that's what I'm gonna ask you.
This
If
is-
there is some sort of average number that you can come up with, you don't have to start counting. Just
This
say,
is
yeah,
from-
there's probably 60 here.
This is from the beginning of the program, so it dates all the way back to 10/22/12. I can tell you that by the week, today alone, I took 2 calls about stolen trash cans myself.
Honey?
Today alone, I took 2 calls about stolen trash cans myself and advised the person to go to the police station to fill out a police report.
Okay.
One was a commercial trash can, one was a residential trash can. That was today alone. Steve Sapino in our office deals with the trash cans. He is the go-to person for the trash program. Capital Waste probably wouldn't be helpful in the situation because they don't deal with the trash cans. But Steve would be the absolute person. Every single person that has a trash can stolen and gets one redelivered goes through Steve. He collects all the police reports, which I have here, and I would say is likely in the hundreds. Some of these reports have over 24 on them, 24 victims that had their trash cans stolen. For instance, this one's from 10/22/12. It has 2, 4, 6, 8. It has 10 victims just from that date. So there certainly is a lot more than 4. I'd be happy to, and I don't know what the miscommunication was there, and I will look into it. But there certainly is an issue, and the trash cans are about $99 each to replace. So there is a high cost.
You have any idea how many were recovered?
I don't. I have no idea how many were recovered. When someone calls us and they said their trash can's been stolen, the first thing that we usually do is suggest they go and check their neighbors' driveways, because sometimes someone thinks they're being helpful and pulls the trash can in for your neighbor and doesn't realize they pulled your trash can and their trash can in. It happens a lot. I haven't heard at all the being attached to the truck thing, but I have heard of people just mistakenly dragging them into the wrong home. And people tend to call back a few minutes later sheepishly and say, oh, you were right, my trash can was in my next door neighbor's driveway. But there is a good number of people that do have their trash can stolen. It does seem to be commercial as well as residential, though, based on these dates. The commercial one today I had, this was the second time that his trash can had been stolen.
Yeah, because I know that even if they are recovered, there must be some that are not recovered.
There's a lot that are not recovered.
And,
If they do get recovered, excuse me, where do they go? Does Capital Waste get them? Where?
If they do get recovered, usually what happens is Steve would get a call from a resident saying that they had an extra trash can in their yard. And then Goody from the City Services Department would go and get that trash can and re-deliver it to where it's supposed to be.
Well, what happens to the one that you already replaced? Do you take it back?
We take it back, yeah.
Councilman
It takes
Simon?
about 2 weeks for a trash can to be replaced.
Councilman Simon?
When they call and they file a complaint and, you submit it to the police department, does the resident have to pay for the barrel that you replace?
No, the way the ordinance or the rule was written is that as long as the resident files a police report, we will replace their trash can. However, if there's a pattern of missing trash cans that becomes suspicious, then we probably wouldn't replace it for free. But that hasn't happened yet. I haven't seen that happen. I haven't had that brought up to me.
So is the resident filing the police report, or is the city?
The
of
resident
Everett
is
doing it?
filing the police report.
So,
For
do we
instance,
get a
the-
copy of the police report also when they?
These are all the copies that we've gotten since the program
Okay, so
started.
like,
Humorously, the top
Napolitano,
one is
there-
the city
There is
councilor.
some kind of miscommunication for you to have that many in
Right.
her.
I'm not sure what happened there.
Right, so something's, missing.
I will address that
And
today.
I know this ordinance being put together is so it would be a smaller fine versus a criminal offense, larceny, and that would be going to court and being,
For it to be larceny, what would happen is the city of Everett would have to take charges against the person. So we would tell the police department that we wanted the person to have charges brought against them, and then they'd have probably a magistrate hearing, I would say. Or maybe be forced to pay for the trash can. I said to Councilor DeFlorio earlier today that this ordinance may actually be better suited to be in front of the City Services Commission because they are in charge of trash and all trash regulations. So that may be something that this group wants to address if that's the plan. If the plan is to try to move this favorably.
so you're saying put this ordinance in and then put it to the, city services commission?
What I would do if I was you is I would send it favorably to the City Services Commission. The City Services Commission, per your ordinances, is in charge of all regulations regarding trash. So I think that this may be better suited to be in their jurisdiction.
Councilor Napolitano?
On that, and I'm glad to see that you brought some documentation, because that's exactly what I was getting at. Establishing that there's a cause and a need prior to trying to come up with a solution. And that's basically what I was looking for with the Everett Police, and I'm glad to see that there's a chart there.
I can
You
have
the
my office try to
information.
get a total on the amount of money that's been lost in the trash cans.
Okay. When you, I've just got a question, because and I do understand what you're saying with the City Services Commission. But they're not empowered to create ordinances, nor are they empowered to set fees or fines.
They're
correct?
empowered, they can set fees. They are empowered, they do set fees. They set fees for things like permits, rentals, et cetera. So they do have the power to set fees. But your ordinances do say that any and all regulations having to do with trash do have to go before the City Services Commission. As far as using 1-8 to find them, I would ask you to ask City Solicitor that. I'm not sure what her feeling would be on that.
If you could. go
One
ahead.
dash eight says up to $300 fine,
Right,
whatever
I
the
just
judge
didn't know
wants.
I didn't know if it said, that the.
Yeah, go
Yeah,
on.
you can figure out.
Well, you cleared the table.
I think, I'll look into that, but they may be able to designate, another department to enforce section 1-8. I have to look at the language. I know it's been a while, since we coordinated that with code enforcement. So, if you want, I can look into, whether they have the authority to designate code enforcement or, someone else to enforce 1-8. Police automatically have that authority.
All right. No, I understood about the police. And if you could, and let us know,
Sure.
I would very much appreciate that.
Absolutely.
I just don't want to duplicate things unnecessarily.
Right.
And that's all we're really looking to do, is get the details.
Right.
Councilor Hannon?
Yeah, I was listening to everybody and, talking about court, and I've been to court a lot, not for myself, but I've been to lots of court cases and everything, and, judges, as far as I'm concerned, don't look favorable to want to sit before a $99 court thing, and even if we can say, well, $99 and maybe half of that, another $50 for expenses for the city, whatever, so $150, they don't want to do that. And that's why when I was talking to the councilor, I had said that I would like to see this wound up being a ticket kind of thing, so that if someone gets a ticket, we figure out that the fine would be $150, and you make it a non-criminal distribution ticket, so that if the person pays it, it's all gone, and I think the person learns a good lesson. If he doesn't pay it, or she doesn't pay it, or whoever took the barrel doesn't pay it, they gotta go to court. And they don't go to court for the missing barrel, they go to court because they didn't pay a ticket. And that could be, that could be a big charge against them, so it's not a funny thing to go into court for that, you know. But that's why I would like to see it as a non-criminal disposition kind of a thing, you know, because I think we get more out of it. And besides that, you know, if a young kid did this, and, you know, a mother or a father would say, oh, my goodness, well, give me the $150 and here, get rid of this thing so I don't get my kid in trouble, you know. So that's why I look favorable to see the non-criminal disposition. And the other thing too, in this, and I don't even think we need an ordinance for that. I'm not sure that we do. If we can establish a ticket, that we put it onto a ticket. You know, we have the tickets that show all kinds of offenses that we have.
All of the offenses on the tickets coordinate with certain sections in the ordinance.
Okay, so we
So.
would make an ordinance about it, okay? I would, okay, that's good.
What's your pleasure? Councilors, what's your pleasure?
Move they be excused with the customary thanks, Mr.
Oh,
Chairman.
yes, sir.
I'd like to motion to grant further time until the city solicitor and especially able to get us back some additional information.
Yeah, and, Mr. Chairman, also I'd like to make a motion that we also look at to the word resident. And they taking something from another residence, I think that should be take something from another property, because it could be a gas station on the other place, you know, so it should be a property.
Okay, the motion
Oh, I
is,
didn't get a chance to read this that quick, you know, okay.
the motion is to grant further time, and, what else was that?
We're waiting.
City solicitor and the
City solicitor?
chief of staff back at the next meeting.
City solicitor?
City solicitor and the chief of staff and the sponsor.
City solicitor and chief of staff at the, next meeting?
Yes, please.
At our next meeting. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. Clerk would read number 3.
All right, item number 3. This is an order by Council John Hanlon to amend City Council Rule 7.5, executive session, by deleting the last 9 words in under the advice of the city solicitor's office.
Councilor Hanlon.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, we were given the proposed order. I don't know who did this, but it's good. And what it does is it says that Rule 7.5A is hereby further amended by adding a second sentence, which will read as follows. If any member questions the validity of the reason for the body entering into executive sessions, the body shall seek the advice of the city solicitor's office before entering into such executive session. And then it shows how it shall be into the book when we get it. So I'm making a motion that we use that as the ordinance, to make that the new ordinance, Rule 7.5A.
Second. Motion is made and seconded to amend the rules in section 7.5A. The motion is to further amend by adding a second sentence, in which reads the following: if any member questions the validity of the reason of the body entering into executive session, the body shall seek the advice of the city solicitor's office before entering in such executive session.
Second that.
That's it. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. Clerk will read number 4.
Item number 4. This is an ordinance offered by Council South Cheddar that the committee review the uneven side parking ban for Stillery rule.
Council, okay, if the councilor's not here,
Did he,
make a
did he,
motion.
Grant
did
further
he-
Yes.
time.
Make a motion
No,
Motion to
speak-
grant.
Mr. Chairman, Chairman.
yes.
Could we, I was talking to Sal, and I understand what he wants, and he wants us to try to improve the ordinance. Next time we meet, could we have the actual ordinance for each member of the committee, so that we could see what the problems would be, that what Sal is interested in, then we could work on it from there. And then I'll second the further time, if that hasn't been seconded.
Motion?
Yeah, I concur.
Motion was made to grant further time, was seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it.
Second.
Second.
Adjourned. We have adjourned.